The city of Lusanga was alive with lights and noise that night, but inside a small apartment, Amal moved quietly, folding tiny clothes into a hospital bag. Her belly was heavy, her smile soft. "Working late," Teboho had said as he left. She kissed his cheek and whispered a prayer for a safe delivery, never imagining how her world was about to break. Hours later, under the harsh lights of the hospital room, her cries mixed with the sound of machines. Sweat covered her face as pain tore through her, but every time she reached for her phone, there was no answer. "Maybe he's on the way," she told herself, holding on to hope that felt thinner each minute. Then her sister burst in, breathless, shaking, her eyes full of something worse than fear. In her hand was a photo. "Amal, he's with someone else, at the Crystal Inn." The words hit harder than any contraction. Amal's heart cracked open, her breath caught in her chest. Tears blurred everything, but she didn't scream. She just pushed one last time, and a tiny cry filled the room. The nurse placed the baby on her chest, and Amal held him close, feeling both love and heartbreak all at once. Her voice was barely a whisper as she kissed his forehead. "You'll never suffer because of his sins," she said softly. In that moment, her pain turned into a quiet promise, a promise to rise, no matter how broken she felt. 2 days after giving birth, Amal lay in her hospital bed, her body weak, her heart even weaker. The scent of disinfectant filled the room, and the soft beeping of machines was the only sound that reminded her she was still alive. Her newborn son slept peacefully beside her, his tiny fingers curled like little promises of hope. But her mind wasn't calm. Her phone kept buzzing on the table. At first she ignored it, too tired to care. Then she saw a message from a friend. "I'm so sorry, Amal, you don't deserve this." Her hands shook as she unlocked her phone. What she saw made her blood run cold. Post after post filled her screen, photos of Teboho, her husband, smiling beside another woman. They were at a fancy restaurant, glasses of champagne raised high, the caption reading, "To New Beginnings." The woman's hand rested on his chest, her smile wide and confident. It was Mr. Makona's daughter, his boss's daughter. Amal felt the room spin. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. "He cheated with her," she whispered. Her voice was soft but sharp, filled with disbelief and pain. A small laugh escaped her lips, not from humor, but from heartbreak so deep it turned numb. She stared at the photo again, eyes burning, and whispered to herself, "Then let him live with her shadow." Her tears stopped, replaced by something stronger, quiet fire. The nurse walked in, cheerful and unaware of the storm that had just erupted inside Amal's heart. "Mama, have you decided on a name for your baby?" she asked kindly. Amal looked down at her son. His tiny chest rose and fell. She smiled, but there was something powerful behind that smile now, something that carried both pain and peace. "Yes," she said softly. "His name is Camagilo Makona." The nurse froze. "Makona? As in Mr. Makona?" she asked, her voice trembling. Amal only nodded. "Yes, that one." The nurse didn't say another word, but the look on her face said everything. Within hours, the name spread through the hospital, then across Lusanga. People whispered in hallways and on phones. She named her baby after her husband's boss. Did you hear why? By evening, even the staff couldn't stop talking. Amal scrolled through her phone again, but this time she wasn't crying. Each photo of Teboho with that woman only reminded her of her new power. Naming her son after the man who unknowingly held her husband's fate, that was her quiet revenge. As night fell, she lay back, watching her baby sleep. The city outside still buzzed with gossip, but inside that room there was peace. She touched Camagilo's cheek gently and whispered, "You are my strength, my proof, and my new beginning." Then she closed her eyes, finally smiling, not because she had healed, but because she had started to rise. Within just a week, the name Camagilo Makona had spread through Lusanga like wildfire. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was a story everyone knew. In salons, taxi ranks, and offices, people whispered, half in shock and half in admiration. "Did you hear? She named her baby after her husband's boss." During labor, while he was cheating, the city couldn't stop talking. Everyone had an opinion, but no one could deny one thing: Amal's quiet strength had become the talk of Lusanga. At Teboho's office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. People avoided looking him in the eye, but as soon as he passed, their whispers began. "That's him," one coworker murmured. "The man who cheated while his wife gave birth." Every laugh felt aimed at him. Every silence felt heavy. His phone buzzed non-stop, messages from friends, warnings from family, even jokes from strangers online. His name was everywhere, but for all the wrong reasons. The morning his boss, Mr. Makuna, called him into the office, Teboho's stomach turned. He walked down the hallway, sweating, tugging at his tie as if it could loosen the shame choking him. Mr. Makuna's office was cold and quiet. Behind the large desk, the older man looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Teboho," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "You cheated on your wife the night she delivered your son." Teboho's mouth opened, but no words came out. "And she named that boy after me." "Sir, it's not what you think," Teboho stammered, voice shaking. His palms were slick with sweat. Mr. Makuna leaned back in his chair, studying him with something between disgust and amusement. Then a small smirk formed on his face. "No, Teboho," he said slowly. "It's exactly what I think. And it's poetic." He paused, then turned his gaze toward the window. "You've made yourself a joke, but she's made herself a legend." Teboho stood frozen, humiliation washing over him. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but there was nothing left to say. The truth had already traveled too far. Mr. Makuna dismissed him with a wave, his attention already elsewhere. As Teboho walked out, heads turned. No one said a word, but their eyes said everything: pity, judgment, even a little awe for the woman who had turned pain into power. Meanwhile, across the city, Amal was in the marketplace, sunlight warming her skin as she pushed Camagilo's stroller. Vendors smiled at her, women stopped to bless the baby, and strangers whispered her name like she was a symbol of courage. For the first time since that awful night, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel broken. As Camagilo cooed softly, Amal smiled down at him. "They're talking about us, my boy," she whispered. "Let them, because this time they're not laughing at me. They're learning from me." And as she walked away, the wind carried the softest sound, not of gossip, but of respect. A week after the city couldn't stop talking about her, Amal woke up to the sound of the doorbell. When she opened the door, she saw the most beautiful bouquet of white lilies she had ever seen. There was a small card tucked between the flowers. She pulled it out with trembling fingers and read the note. "You named strength after me. Let me return the favor. M. Makuna." For a long moment she just stood there, staring at the words, unsure if it was real. Mr. Makuna, her husband's boss, had reached out to her. Not with anger, not with gossip, but with respect. Days turned into weeks, and Amal began to rebuild her life. Between sleepless nights and diaper changes, she prayed for direction. Then one morning she received a formal email from Makuna Holdings. The subject line read, "Employment Offer Charity Foundation Manager." Her breath caught. She read the message 3 times before it sank in. Mr. Makuna wanted her to head his company's charity foundation, a position of influence and trust. It wasn't just a job, it was a new beginning. On her first day, Amal dressed carefully in a crisp white suit. It wasn't about fashion, it was about strength, purity, and peace. She held Camagilo close, kissed his tiny forehead, and whispered, "Today, we start fresh." When she arrived at the company's glass building, the security guard greeted her politely, unaware that this young mother was about to shift the energy of the entire place. Inside, the office buzzed with whispers as she walked through the lobby. Some employees recognized her immediately. "That's her," one whispered. "The woman who named her son after the boss." Amal kept her chin high, her steps calm and steady. She had no reason to shrink anymore. Then, as she reached the reception desk, she saw him. Teboho. He was standing there in his work uniform, papers in hand, his mouth slightly open. The color drained from his face the moment their eyes met. For a second, time froze. His voice caught in his throat. "Amal," he whispered, barely audible. But she didn't stop, she didn't flinch. Amal turned to the receptionist with a calm smile. "Please tell my assistant I've arrived," she said softly. The receptionist nodded, stunned. Then, without another glance at Teboho, Amal walked past him, her heels clicking on the marble floor, each step echoing like thunder in his chest. He stood there, watching her disappear into the elevator, realizing what had just happened. The woman he had broken, the one he had taken for granted, was now walking into the executive wing, his boss's trust on her shoulders. And he worked for her now. At that moment, Teboho understood something he never had before. You can lose everything in one mistake, but the woman you underestimate might just rise higher than you ever dreamed. Teboho's downfall didn't happen all at once. It started quietly, almost unnoticeably, like a slow leak in a sinking boat. The first project he handled after the scandal collapsed. Clients who once greeted him with smiles now avoided his calls. In the corridors of Makona Holdings, whispers chased him like shadows. "That's him," people murmured, pretending not to stare. "The man who cheated on his wife while she was giving birth." Some said it with pity, others with judgment, but all of them said it. He felt their eyes everywhere he went. Every meeting turned awkward. His ideas were ignored, his confidence faded, and even the interns seemed to pity him. One afternoon, he overheard two colleagues talking near the copy machine. "Imagine cheating on a woman like Amal," one said. "And now she's the one running the foundation." The other chuckled. "Serves him right." Teboho pretended not to hear, but their words stayed with him, heavier than any workload. Meanwhile, Amal was thriving. Her new office overlooked the same city that once whispered about her pain. Now they spoke her name with admiration. Her gentle voice filled rooms with calm, her ideas brought hope to struggling families, and her quiet grace made everyone want to work harder. People respected her, not because of her story but because of her strength. She treated everyone with kindness, even those who once judged her. At home, her world was peaceful. Every evening, she returned to her small apartment, where Camagilo's laughter filled the air like music. She would hold him close, humming lullabies softly as the city lights blinked outside the window. "You are my strength," she would whisper, brushing her fingers across his tiny cheek. "My vengeance and my peace." Each time he giggled, a piece of her broken heart mended itself. Teboho saw her often in the hallways, always surrounded by respect. People smiled when she passed. Her white dresses, her soft tone, her confidence, everything about her glowed. She no longer looked like the woman he once hurt. She looked untouchable. Sometimes he tried to speak to her to apologize again, but she never gave him the chance. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than words ever could. Soon, rumors spread that his position might be cut. The same colleagues who once supported him now avoided eye contact. Even his boss barely acknowledged him. The irony was bitter. His own downfall was happening in the same building where Amal had risen. One night, as he packed his things after another failed project, he caught sight of her walking out of her office, holding Camagilo in her arms. She laughed, a sound light and pure. And in that laugh he saw everything he had lost: love, respect, peace, and the family that could have been his forever. It was late in the evening. The office lights were dim, the building almost empty except for the soft hum of computers and the sound of papers being shuffled. Amal sat at her desk, finishing a report for the charity foundation. Camagilo was asleep in a small crib near the window, his little chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. The quietness of the room brought her a strange calm, a calm she had fought hard to earn. Then suddenly she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Amal." It was weak, almost broken. She froze. Slowly she turned her head. Standing in the doorway was Teboho. His once polished suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his eyes heavy with regret. He looked nothing like the confident man she used to know. Now he looked defeated, a man who had finally run out of excuses. "Amal, please," he said, stepping closer. "I'm sorry, I lost everything. You were right, I was stupid." His voice cracked as he spoke, and for a moment he seemed smaller than she remembered. Amal didn't say a word at first. She closed her laptop slowly and stood up, facing him. The air between them was thick with memories, laughter that turned to lies, promises that turned to pain. She looked at him, really looked at him, and all she felt was quiet sadness. "No, Teboho," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't lose everything, you gave it away." He stared at her, confused, his eyes wet. I don't understand," he whispered. "The night I gave birth," she continued, "you chose yourself. I chose my son, and that made all the difference." Her tone wasn't angry, it was steady, peaceful, like a woman who had already moved beyond the pain. Teboho's tears fell freely now. He tried to speak again, but the words wouldn't come. "Amal, I loved you. I made a mistake, but I—" She raised her hand gently, cutting him off. "No, Teboho. Love doesn't disappear when things get hard. Love stays. What you had for me wasn't love, it was comfort. And when life tested you, you failed." He stood there, shoulders trembling, guilt written all over his face. He wanted her forgiveness, but deep down, he knew she had already given it, just not in the way he hoped. Amal turned and walked over to Kamajilo's crib. She lifted her son into her arms, his warmth grounding her in the present. She looked back at Teboho one last time, her voice steady and sure. "This," she said, glancing at the baby, "is the only man I'll ever need." Teboho's knees weakened as he watched her hold their son, the life he had missed, the peace he could never return to. She kissed Kamajilo's forehead and turned away, her heart light and unshaken. Teboho stood alone in the doorway, realizing too late that some losses can't be fixed, especially the ones you caused yourself. Weeks passed, and Amal continued to prove herself at Makona Holdings. Her work spoke louder than her story ever had. Every meeting she led ended with progress. Every project she touched seemed to shine. Employees respected her, not just as their manager but as a woman who carried quiet power. Even Mr. Makona, a man known for his stern and distant nature, found himself impressed by her calm strength and gentle leadership. One afternoon, as the golden light of sunset filled the building, Mr. Makona's assistant appeared at her door. "Mr. Makona would like to see you in his office," she said. Amal nodded, a little nervous. She smoothed her dress and made her way upstairs. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and she stepped into his large office, where the city stretched out below like a sea of lights. Mr. Makona looked up from his desk and smiled, something he rarely did. "Amal," he said warmly, gesturing for her to sit, "you've done remarkable work. I've watched you grow this foundation with heart, precision, and courage. But there's something you should know." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a large envelope. Inside was a document stamped and signed. He slid it across the table toward her. Amal looked at it, confused. "What is this?" she asked softly. "It's a legal transfer," he said. 40% of my company's shares to your name." Amal froze. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me?" Mr. Makona leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because you reminded me of what true strength looks like," he said quietly. "When everyone else spoke of revenge, you spoke of purpose. You didn't fight to destroy, you fought to rebuild. You didn't just name your son after me, you honored what my name used to stand for. Now I want to honor what you stand for." Tears welled in Amal's eyes. She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. The same woman who once cried alone in a hospital bed now sat across from one of the most powerful men in Lusanga, being handed a future she never imagined. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling but sincere. "But please understand, I didn't do any of this for revenge. I did it to rise." Mr. Makona smiled, nodding slowly. "And that," he said, "is exactly why you deserve it." As Amal walked out of his office that evening, the city lights seemed brighter, softer, almost as if the world itself was bowing to her journey. She held her head high, her heart full not of pride but of peace. Years passed, and the city of Lusanga no longer whispered Amal's name in pity. They spoke it with respect. The little boy she once held in her arms was now a bright, confident child. That night the grand hall sparkled with lights as people gathered for the annual charity gala. Amal stood on stage in a graceful blue gown that shimmered under the spotlights, her son Camagilo holding her hand. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, celebrating her strength. She smiled, her eyes glistening, remembering every tear, every sleepless night that led to this moment. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall, and the Woman of Strength award goes to Amal Makuna. The applause grew louder. Cameras flashed. Her story, once one of betrayal and heartbreak, had become a story of victory. She glanced down at Camagilo, who grinned proudly, squeezing her hand. At the back of the room, hidden among the guests, Teboho stood still. His suit was neat, but his eyes were tired. He watched her with a strange mix of pride and pain. He had lost everything, his job, his respect, his family, but seeing her on that stage, radiant and strong, reminded him of what he once had and threw away. Then Camagilo spotted him. His face lit up. "That's my dad," he shouted with childlike joy, waving across the room. The crowd murmured, some turning to look. Amal knelt beside her son, brushing a hand through his hair, her voice gentle but firm. "Yes, baby," she said softly, smiling with grace. "He was your beginning, not your end." The audience erupted again in applause, the sound washing over the hall. Amal straightened, took her son's hand, and walked off the stage, her head high, her heart free, her legacy untouchable.